Stopping drivers high on pot. Now that recreational marijuana is legal in Missouri, law enforcement is looking for the right way to look for impairment behind the wheel.
5 states have specific limits for THC in the blood. Missouri is not one of them. Lauren Schwenker joins us live with the current regulations and how they're enforced. Lauren?
Yeah, Maria, right now in Missouri, you can't use marijuana at all while driving a vehicle. And here in Springfield, there's an ordinance that prohibits consuming marijuana in a motor vehicle.
There is no magic number with marijuana. There's no certain level that would justify or support an inference that that person is under the influence.
Dan Vietz, a Missouri attorney who pushed for the passage of Amendment 3, says people are still being convicted for driving behind the wheel after using marijuana, and that it could actually be increasing after the amendment passed last year.
I do think there are some police officers who know that they cannot arrest people for simple possession now, and they are more inclined to charge people, arrest people on suspicion of driving while under the influence.
So far, Illinois, Montana, Nevada, Ohio, and Washington have specific limits for THC. We asked Vietz if that would ever become a possibility here in Missouri.
Missouri cannot pass a so-called per se marijuana impaired driving law. Missouri will never have a law of that nature because our Constitution forbids it.
Vietz says some states that have passed the THC limits have repealed it because of the limited science. The Missouri State Highway Patrol says it's nothing new. They're still looking for signs of impairment.
The DWI doesn't only apply to alcohol. It applies to anything that impairs your ability to operate a vehicle.
Corporal Sam Carpenter with the Missouri State Highway Patrol says it takes a few more steps to arrest someone who is under the influence of marijuana or any other drugs that impair your driving.
We do have troopers that are specifically trained as drug recognition experts to look further. We can call those people out when we're on traffic stops.
What we ought to focus on is the ability of the individual to drive safely. And again, the cause of the impairment is not as significant as the fact of the impairment.
Vietz says new bills will be considered by the Missouri General Assembly coming next year. Reporting live in the newsroom, I'm Lauren Schwenker, KY3 News.